second paragraph. We are in the middle of explaining the idea of the double things that the Medrash said, נחמו ami, that there is a double comfort, and that has to do with the double punishment that's a result of the double sin, and it has to do with the mitzvahs that are doubled, and because the mitzvahs are doubled, so the comfort is doubled, and we were trying to figure out what is all these things that are being doubled. So we started explaining, first of all, the doubling in the mitzvahs. That in the mitzvahs, there is a doubling, that there is the effect that it has on the person, and then the person becomes refined through the mitzvahs that he does. And there's another doubling, not another doubling. Another component of the mitzvahs is that he's refining the world. Then we spoke about that in the person himself, there's the double effect of mitzvahs. The double effect of mitzvahs is that you have the nefesh halakis and the nefesh habahamis and chalki ba'olam. And we explained that when it comes to the nefesh halakis, that doesn't need a tikkun. What part needs to have a tikkun? One needs to be misakin and fix up and elevate and refine his nefesh habahamis and his body, and by extension also the part of the world that the body and the nefesh habahamis engages in. That's one part of the accomplishments of the mitzvahs. Now, despite the fact we said that there's no purpose in the mitzvahs being brought to a state of fixing up the person, because nefesh halakis needs no fixing up, but still in all, there's yiridol tzorech aliyah. It gains an aliyah through the mitzvahs, even in nefesh halakis. So we spoke about the aliyah is that it goes from just being from the garments to being joined with the king's body, and also it goes from a state of just being in a state of amida, above, standing still, versus dafke down here, it's in a way of traveling, in a way of going and accomplishing, in a way of bli gvul, in an infinite way. Now he's going to go on further to give further aspects of the doubling that there is in the mitzvahs. So again, we're holding line 4, the 4th page of the printouts, page Ches, 2nd paragraph on the page. According to the above, we could explain also the doubled aspects of the mitzvahs that we said, because there was doubled aspects in the mitzvahs, so the comfort and consolation is doubled as well. נחמו. In addition to the doubling in the refining of the person, that's one aspect, and the double aspect is the refining also of the world. There's also the doubling in the refinement of the person himself. That there's two components in the refining of the person himself. That's one component, like we mentioned before, refining and fixing up the body and the nefesh habahamis, because they do need a tikkun. And then there's the level of the neshama, that the neshama doesn't need a tikkun, like we brought from the Eitz Chaim, but an aliyah it can gain an elevation, an ascent. So that's the doubling in the mitzvahs, the way it's in the person himself. In a similar vein, just like we said, that it's not just about being mizach the person versus being mizach the world, but in the person himself, there's a double aspect of the mitzvahs. So too, on the flip side, in the being refining the world, there's also a double aspect of the zichuch. How is that? It's making a home for the Eibush down below. As it's known, to be able to make a home for the Eibush down below, the first has to be the prefacing. You need to clean out the home. When you make a home for a king, you need to make sure there's no cobwebs over there, there's no dirt on the floor, there's no grime on the windows. You need to clear it out. You need to make it first a clean place, and then make it a welcoming place by furniture and other things. What is that beruchnius? Inyan avoid the sur merah. We need to first do the avodah that has to do with turning away from bad. But and only afterwards, the avodah could be the avodah of the doing of good. If we could add, so therefore that's the double component. The double component is this idea of having the sur merah is one level, and the asay toiv is the other level, the other component, the other half of it, the other part of it. If we could add the doubling of the mitzvahs it's also in the effect that the mitzvahs have, that or not the effect, but or the action of the mitzvahs, the accomplishment of the mitzvahs. The doubling of it is that you need both involved. The nefesh elokis and the nefesh habahamis both need to be involved and engaged in the doing of the avodah. Nefesh elokis mitzad atzma, nefesh elokis on its own, ein yechol lifoil beguf hagashmi, cannot affect and influence the physical body. Nefesh habahamis mitzad atzma, the animal soul on its own. Since the spirit of an animal descends down to below, it doesn't have the capability to fulfill a mitzvah. So nefesh elokis is too spiritual, and because it's too spiritual, it cannot engage with the physical body. It needs the intermediary of the nefesh habahamis. On the other hand, nefesh elokis, if nefesh elokis is not in the picture, the nefesh habahamis has no interest, no involvement with mitzvahs. Therefore, the fulfillment of mitzvahs has to be only through both nefashos together. That's the doubling in the fulfillment of mitzvahs. Pulas hanefesh habahamis, the effect, the action and activity of nefesh habahamis, which is al derech biruv zichaylam. That's similar to the component of refining the world, because within the person, the part that's most similar and corresponding to the world is nefesh habahamis. Upulus hanefesh elokis, and the effect and the action of the nefesh elokis in doing the mitzvahs is al derech aliyas haneshama. That's similar to the ascent of the neshama. So here we have all these different ways of understanding the doubling of the mitzvahs. We also brought beforehand that there is, because the averos were doubled, that's why the punishment was doubled. So we wanted to understand what is the idea of the doubling of the averos. To understand that, we said, if we understand the doubling of the mitzvahs, we'll understand how the averos are doubled as well, because that's the flip side of what he was supposed to accomplish with the mitzvahs. Let's see it inside. Ois Gimel, bottom of the 4th page, line 26. That's also the meaning, that it says that she sinned. The Klal Yisrael sinned doubly, shenemar, like it says in the pasuk, Kishtayim ra'os asa ami. 2 wickedness, 2 evils, my nation did. That's the proof of the Medrash that the Yidden sinned doubly. Maybe like the Maimer the Frierdiker Rebbe brings, where it says after Kishtayim rois asu ami, and the pasuk explains, Oisi azvu mekoir mayim chayim, they deserted me, the source of living waters. That's one wickedness, that's one ra. Lachtzev lahem, to carve out for themselves boiros nishbarim, broken cisterns and wells and pits, asher lo yochilu hamoyim, that cannot contain water. The top of page test. In the olden times in Eretz Yisrael, where rain was not always plentiful, so for the summer months, they used to, from the winter, they used to fill up cisterns of water. You could still see it when you go touring in different places in Eretz Yisrael. They had these underground, like, if you want to call it a pit, that was like plastered in such a way to be able to contain water, and these were cisterns that kept water for use, even when the rain was not falling, like in the summer months and so on. So the Hashem uses that as a analogy and a metaphor. They leave a source of living water. You have a wellspring, and the water is always flowing, and you go ahead to cisterns, but those cisterns are broken. Those cisterns are leaking. They're not well sealed, and therefore there's no water in it. They can't contain water. So this is the two evils that my nation did, both leaving the Eibishter and going after the broken cisterns. In the simple meaning of the pasuk, it's referring to they deserted Hashem's service and instead followed Avodah Zarah, for example. So it's not just that they did not follow Hashem. That itself is already one thing, but they chose to follow broken cistern. They chose to follow, idols that have no power and so on. So the explanation of these two ideas in the doubling of the sin, move on. From this is understood the idea of the doubling of the sin is concerning every detail of the mitzvah. This means when a person sins and he leaves the mitzvahs behind, he's losing the positive aspect of the mitzvahs. That's the first thing that it says that they deserted me. That's one component that they're missing in a sin and not doing mitzvahs. In addition to this, becomes also a negative thing, that they are also doing something else. That's the idea of chiseling out, carving out for themselves broken cisterns. And the Maimon is going to explain specifically what this means. So he says in line 6, the idea behind this is, it says in the pasuk, see, I've placed before you today that which is life and good, and that which is death and bad. And there's also that which is in between. In other words, mitzvahs are the good in life, Averis is the opposite of good in life, and then there are things that are inyan rishus, permitted things. Klippas noiga, neither mitzvahs nor Averis. That's what's intermediary. Through a sin, he's not refining himself in the world to make for the Eibishter a home down here below. Not only is it lacking in the idea of life, he is not refining the person, he's not refining the world, which is the first part of the pasuk. They deserted me. He's not accomplishing that which he needs to accomplish for Hashem in making a home for the Eibishter down here below. They're missing out on that mission. In addition to that, that also becomes the opposite of that mission. That they are chiseling out broken cisterns. What is the corresponding level in the neshama of broken cisterns? Not only that it's lacking. I'm sorry, 1 second. There is in the Adam and the Zichur Ha'olam, in the refinement of the person, meaning refining the Nefesh Bahamis and refining the world, that there could have been the advantage of refining that. That's part one. Part two is, instead of refining them, the person, and instead of refining the world, they are making the world more coarse. That's the flip side of it. They're making the person more coarse. Now, in the neshama itself, you had, like we said, there is the maila of, doesn't need a birur, doesn't need a tikkun, but there's the Maila, the Aliyah that comes through its Avodah. So he's saying in that Aliyah, in that idea corresponding to the lack of life and the connection with the negative also reflects in the neshama. Let's read it again from line 14. In a similar vein concerning the neshama, not only is he lacking the advantage that could have been through the avodah and Torah mitzvahs when it descended down here below, and it remained in its state and situation the way it was before its descent down here below. In addition to that, it becomes by the neshama a descent that now the neshama also, which instead of it could have been elevated through it, it descends even lower, and now it's connected with the broken cisterns that cannot contain water. Then he goes on further in the next part of the Medrash says, line 22, so to its explanation, the continuation of the words in the Medrash, since they sinned doubly, therefore they were hit doubly. The punishment is doubled concerning every detail no matter the sin. Just like we said, that it's both in the person that had to be in this dachik, the world that had to be in this dachik. There's two parts. There is, he missed out on the ascent, or his dachus, and he schlepped it down to Klippa, and the neshama missing the ascent, and it's being schlepped downwards. The same thing in the punishment is also in both, in every detail of what the sin is made up of. The idea behind this is, in Yedua, it's known, through a sin becomes the idea of exile, that's the level. What's the idea of exile? How does exile down here occur? It's because the Shekhinah departs. Because of the leaving of the Shekhinah, that's why down here, Yidden don't have that revealed special protection of Hashem, and we are physically in exile. Like it's brought down the Zohar, during the time of Golus, Hashem rises up and departs higher and higher. And they're connected because the Eibishter departed higher and higher and like removed himself from being like visibly and in a revealed way interacting with us. So therefore it's possible for Yidden to be under the control of the nations, Chas v'Shalom. Now he says, what are those levels? The Kutchabrichu Hainu B'china Zer Anpin Sheb'china Soiv Kolam. And Chassidus and Kabbalah brings down that there is the Yichud Kutchabrichu Shchinte. Kutchabrichu, the level that's holy and blessed at the same time, that's the level of Zeir Anpin, the Midas. When we talk about the Midas in comparison to Malchus, which is Shechina, so Malchus is considered the level of Memal Kolam. Shechina is Shechenes Mislabeshes, like a Malklam fills the world. And Kutchabrichu, which is the level of Kaddish and Muvdal, it's beyond and above, that's Soiv Kolam. Zeir Anpin is again, in regards and in comparison to Malchus, the Midas are considered like Soiv. So Soiv Kolam goes up, all the way up, during the time of Golus. Now the Rebbe is going to add, V'yesh oid pirush b'kutchabrichu. There's another explanation in what level we are referring to when we're talking about kutchabrichu. Before we said kutchabrichu, that's Zeir Anpin, u'shchinte, yichud kutchabrichu u'shchinte, shchinte is Malchus. But there's a different explanation that kutchabrichu contains really both levels. V'yesh oid pirush b'kutchabrichu shekadosh, Shepirushim moved all the word Kaddish. Holiness means separated. Ubechinas Soiv Kolam, top of page Yud, that's the level of Soiv. Ubaruch Shemal Shoin Hamshacha B'chiras Malkalam Baruch. That's from the word Hamshacha is Malkalam, not necessarily the level of Malchus, but in Kutsha Brichu itself is a division between Kutsha is Saiviv, Brichu is Malchus, and therefore, going back to what the Zohar says that in the time of Golus, Kutsha Brichu goes upwards, so it's not just limited to Saiviv Kalam then. If Kutsha Brichu includes both. When it says the meaning of what the Zohar says, the Kutsha Brichu goes up higher and higher. It is the departing, both of the level of Soiv Kalam, the ascending and departing also of Mamal Kalam. That is the double hit, because there is two concealments of Hashem, two ways how Hashem doesn't kaviyachol interact with Yidden in the time of Golus. So the Maimer is going to go on to explain in a practical sense, what does that mean that Soiviv is concealed, and what does it mean that Amal is concealed? Line 6, so Birding your Protis Yosef explaining this matter more in detail. In the time of Golus it says, our signs we did not see, etc. What is the level of our signs? That's the different signs and wonders. That's the way Hashem runs the world, in a way that's supernatural, beyond nature, and that is a result of Soiv Kalam. That Soiv Kalalmin is responsible for miracles. So since we don't say Valzen Namar, since we say concerning this we say Loira Inu, that we do not see Oisei Seinu, during the time of Golus, we do not see the way the Eibishter runs the world in a way that's supernatural and beyond nature. So therefore, that is the siluk of Soiv Kalam that we said. The Kaddish part, the Kutsha part of Kutsha Brichu that goes upwards, because we don't see the miracles that are beyond nature. Line 12, in addition to this, not only do we not see the supernatural, we do not see Soiv Kalam, that Soiv Kalam goes upwards, but also there is even lacking in the way Hashem runs the world according to nature. And the natural way of Hashem running the world, that is a result of a Mal Kalam. So therefore, since it's lacking, as we're soon going to explain how, the level of the natural way of running the world, that shows that not just Soiv Kalamin went up, and Isalik Leila, but also Brichu, Kutsha Brichu, both of them, Soiv and Mal Kalam went upwards. Like explained by the Rebbe Rasham Kutz's Mayin, Shebezman HaGolus, Ein Neshamas Yisrael Yicholos LaKabel Ma'osim Makim Shebesham Mekabel Somus Ha'olam. Even the Hashpas HaChayis, where the nations of the world receive, they don't receive miracles. They get regular Hashpah of day-to-day life, of the natural world. Even that, Yidden do not receive like the nations of the world, though it runs according to nature. So that means that Yidden are not just lacking the time of Golus, the level of Soiv Kalalmin, but they're also lacking from the level of Amal Kalam. That's what it means, that their punishment was doubly. That is a lack and deficiency that we have. That we're both lacking, both the level that is Soiv Kalam, the transcendent level, the Kucha, that's responsible for the Nisim, for the miracles. Even the natural world, we are not openly and in a revealed way successful, as, let's say, the Yamar. Because even when it comes to a Malakalam, that is also an ascendancy. The Brichu, the natural way of running the world, is also lacking.